In defense of irreducible complexity and intelligent design, ID, the claim that Michael Behe's theory of irreducible complexity, IC, fails to provide evidence for intelligent design, ID, deserves a more nuanced discussion. While it's true that Behe faced opposition during legal trials, the scientific community's dismissal of IC is not necessarily a disproof of its validity, but often a reflection of the inherent biases in a field dominated by materialistic assumptions. Irreducible complexity, a logical challenge to Darwinian gradualism. Irreducible complexity posits that certain biological systems, such as the bacterial flagellum, are so intricately interdependent that removing any one part would render the system non-functional. This complexity suggests that these systems could not have evolved through small, incremental changes, as Darwinian evolution proposes. Instead, it implies that these systems must have appeared fully formed, much like how complex machines, e.g., engines or computers, cannot operate if key components are missing. The bacterial flagellum, with its motor-like structure, presents one such system that challenges the standard evolutionary narrative. The failure in court, a philosophical and methodological discrepancy. Critics often cite Behe's inability to convince the court as evidence that IC is flawed. However, it's important to recognize that legal verdicts are not scientific conclusions. In the 2005 Kitzmiller v. Dover trial, the dismissal of ID was largely predicated on the court's reliance on the definition of science as strictly naturalistic, limited to explanations that invoke only undirected processes like natural selection. The issue at hand is not whether IC is scientifically valid, but whether the methodology of science is broad enough to consider design as a viable hypothesis. The demand that ID provide unreasonable demands of proof misunderstands the burden of proof in scientific debate. When ID proponents argue that certain systems appear designed, they are offering a positive hypothesis. Some features of life appear more plausibly explained by intelligent causes than by random mutation and selection. It is not about proving absolute impossibilities, but about comparing the explanatory power of two competing paradigms: intelligent causation versus blind, undirected processes. Bias in science, a common problem. It is suggested that Behe ignored possibilities that didn't support his conclusion. However, it's equally true that many in the scientific community dismiss ID without fully considering its claims due to a philosophical bias toward materialism. The simulations used to support abiogenesis and Darwinian evolution often assume the very mechanisms under question. The possibility of IC doesn't reject evolutionary processes in all contexts, but challenges whether these processes are sufficient to account for certain complex systems. Unreasonable demands of proof? Critics of ID often claim that proponents demand unreasonable proof, while offering no testable predictions of their own. This ignores the fact that many of the predictions and frameworks associated with Darwinian evolution remain speculative, relying on just-so stories to account for gaps in the fossil record or unexplained biological complexity. Moreover, ID is falsifiable. If a supposedly irreducibly complex system could be shown to arise through gradual processes, ID would be undermined. Yet despite numerous attempts, such demonstrations have been lacking in robustness. Even when hypothetical evolutionary pathways are proposed, they often lack experimental support or direct observational evidence. Intelligent design, a plausible alternative. Finally, the claim that ID offers untestable and unscientific explanations misunderstands the nature of design detection. The science of forensics, archaeology, and cryptography are all grounded in detecting intelligent agency through patterns that natural processes alone cannot explain. When ID looks at biological complexity, it applies similar principles, seeking out patterns and functions that are best explained by intelligence rather than random mutation. The idea that IC is untestable is also incorrect. by looking at specific biological structures and challenging scientists to demonstrate a step-by-step evolutionary process that could build these structures, ID presents a testable and falsifiable hypothesis. To date, many systems proposed as irreducibly complex, like the bacterial flagellum, have not been convincingly explained through Darwinian mechanisms. Conclusion: irreducible complexity and intelligent design offer a robust challenge to the Darwinian explanation of biological complexity. While IC has faced opposition, the scientific merit of the theory lies not in courtroom battles, but in ongoing scientific debate. Rather than dismissing ID based on assumptions about what constitutes science, we should remain open to the possibility that life's complexity may indeed point to an intelligent source. Rejecting ID a priori because it challenges the philosophical foundations of naturalism limits our ability to explore alternative explanations for the origins of life.